Throughout the centuries, humanity has relentlessly sought to understand the mysteries of existence, both in the material and spiritual worlds. One of the most enigmatic and intriguing practices that has traversed cultures and eras is alchemy. Far more than a mere attempt to turn metals into gold, alchemy holds within its symbols profound processes of inner transformation, something Carl Jung identified as a reflection of the psychological journey of self-discovery and healing. In this text, we will explore how alchemy, a mystical art often seen as archaic and outdated, directly connects to modern psychology, and how its operations and symbols reveal the stages of human spiritual and mental evolution. Behind every alchemical experiment lies a parallel with the battles and discoveries of the human psyche, revealing that, amidst chaos and darkness, true enlightenment can only be achieved through personal transformation. The evolution of humanity was marked by a crucial transition from instinctive behavior to the use of reason. In the beginning, human beings acted primarily driven by instincts, much like animals, which helped them survive in hostile environments. However, as rational thought developed, we began to question and analyze the world around us, creating new ways of living and understanding reality. Rationality gained prominence during the Age of Enlightenment, replacing old beliefs and mythologies, shaping modern thought. This focus on reason, however, came at a price. Many cultures began to lose touch with the deeper, instinctive aspects of the human psyche, what Jung would later call the unconscious. The rise of reason altered the historical perception of alchemy, which once blended science and spirituality. What was previously a practice combining both elements became devalued as rational thought took over. For Carl Jung, alchemy represented a bridge between these two worlds, rational and instinctive, showing how the process of internal transformation was just as important as intellectual progress. Carl Jung and the disconnection of the modern world. Jung observed that modern society was progressively distancing itself from its unconscious. With the advancement of science, technology, and the pursuit of material progress, many people began to ignore the deeper aspects of the mind, those that Jung considered essential for psychological health. He noted that by focusing solely on reason and logic, society was becoming detached from dreams, myths, and symbols, which are ways of expressing what is hidden in the unconscious. For Jung, this disconnection created an inner void. He saw symptoms like anxiety, depression, and a sense of alienation as signs that people were estranged from their inner world. To heal this gap, Jung proposed a return to introspection and a reconnection with the symbols of the unconscious, allowing for a greater balance between the rational mind and instincts. Carl Jung's rediscovery of alchemy. Carl Jung rediscovered alchemy during his research on the human mind, and this discovery deeply influenced his work. Through studying alchemical texts, Jung noticed that the alchemist's goal transcended the physical transformation of metals. Jung used alchemy as a key to understanding psychological processes, applying it in his analysis of dreams and self-discovery. Jung expanded his clinical interpretations through alchemy, especially in dream analysis. For him, alchemical symbols were expressions of psychological processes, reflecting the psychic struggles and transformations of individuals. From pseudoscience to psychological wisdom. For centuries, alchemy was discredited, especially with the rise of modern science, as discussed later. Alchemists, who sought to transform metals into gold and achieve immortality, were seen as mystics or charlatans, and their practices were relegated to the realm of superstition. Jung recognized in alchemy an attempt to unconsciously express the psychological transformations that the human soul undergoes. The scientific discoveries of alchemists. Despite being viewed by many as a mystical practice, alchemists significantly contributed to the development of modern science. In their attempts to transform metals and find the elixir of life, they made important discoveries about the nature of substances and chemical processes. Among their key contributions were the development of experimental techniques such as distillation and sublimation, still used in chemistry today. Additionally, alchemists were responsible for creating materials like glass and gunpowder, as well as improving the production of medicines and dyes. These discoveries not only helped shape the field of chemistry, but also laid the groundwork for deeper studies of matter and chemical reactions. Although the alchemists' ultimate goals were not always achieved, Their experimental practices paved the way for modern science. Alchemy and modern chemistry. Alchemy, despite being surrounded by mysticism, was a direct precursor to modern chemistry. Alchemists sought to transform common metals into gold and find the elixir of life. But in the process, they developed techniques still used in science today. Processes like distillation, crystallization, and fermentation were first experimented with by alchemists and later refined by chemists. In the 17th century, with the emergence of the scientific method, alchemy began to lose its status as a scientific practice, replaced by chemistry, which was based on verifiable experiments and concrete results. Figures like Robert Boyle and Antoine Lavoisier laid the foundations of modern chemistry, showing that chemical reactions followed clear, predictable natural laws, moving away from the mystical approaches of the alchemists. Though alchemy ceased to be seen as a practical science, its contributions were fundamental to the advancement of chemistry, helping to shape modern understanding of elements and their transformations. Alchemical symbolism and the unconscious for Jung. Jung attributed deep psychological meaning to alchemical symbols, far beyond their traditional interpretations. He believed these symbols represented profound processes within the unconscious. For Jung, the transformation of metals described by alchemists was a metaphor for the deep psychological changes occurring in the psyche. To Jung, alchemical symbols, such as gold and mercury, carried profound psychological meanings. He associated gold with the quest for inner perfection and mercury with the fluidity and transformation of the spirit. Alchemy and the world of dreams. Carl Jung found a deep connection between alchemical symbols and his patients' dreams. For him, dreams were a way through which the unconscious manifested, bringing forth symbols and images that often mirrored alchemical symbols. These dreams, like the practice of alchemy, were a way to explore and process what was hidden in the mind. Dreams filled with images such as gold and fire reflected for Jung the psychic movement of self-discovery and personal transformation. In dreams, Jung identified symbols that reflected psychic transformation, similar to the alchemical metaphor of transmuting metals into gold. This connection between alchemy and dreams provided Jung with a key to interpreting the internal world of his patients. He used the symbols that appeared in dreams to better understand internal conflicts and guide his patients toward individuation, the process of self-integration and understanding. Taoism and the impact of Richard Wilhelm. Carl Jung was deeply influenced by Richard Wilhelm, a scholar of Eastern traditions. Wilhelm introduced Jung to the Taoist text The Secret of the Golden Flower, an ancient book on meditation and spiritual alchemy. This encounter with Taoism opened Jung's eyes to the idea that alchemy, both in the East and West, involved not only physical transformation, but also profound spiritual and psychological transformation. For Jung, Taoism reinforced the importance of the union of opposites, a central theme in both alchemy and analytical psychology. In Taoism, this union is represented by yin and yang, symbolizing the duality present in all things, light and dark, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. This was in perfect harmony with Jung's ideas about the balance between the conscious and unconscious. From this influence, Jung began to see alchemy as a universal process of psychic transformation, valid in both Eastern and Western traditions. His interaction with Wilhelm and Taoist philosophy marked a turning point in the evolution of Jungian thought. Comparison between Eastern and Western alchemy. In comparing Eastern and Western alchemical traditions, Jung identified profound parallels, although they followed different spiritual approaches. Both forms of alchemy, whether in the East or West, sought transformation and spiritual elevation, but each followed distinct paths to achieve this goal. In Eastern alchemy, particularly in Chinese Taoism, the focus was more on the quest for longevity and spiritual immortality. The process of inner transformation involved meditative practices and balancing the body and mind's opposing energies, represented by yin and yang. For Jung, this reflected the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious, a concept he applied to his own theory of psychology. Western alchemy, on the other hand, was more focused on the transformation of physical substances, such as the transmutation of metals into gold, though its practitioners also sought a spiritual goal, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, a symbol of perfection and enlightenment. Although Jung recognized the value of both traditions, he chose to focus more on Western alchemy, as its symbols aligned more directly with the Western psychological tradition and his understanding of the unconscious. The origin of the term alchemy. The word alchemy has a rich and multifaceted origin, reflecting the blending of cultures and traditions that shaped the practice over the centuries. It is believed that the term comes from the Arabic alchemia, where al means the, and chemia refers to chemistry or a secret art. This Arabic term was influenced by the Greek word chemia, which refers to the art of transforming metals. In ancient Greece, this practice was already associated with attempts to transform ordinary materials into precious substances. Alchemy also has strong roots in ancient Egypt, where chem was the ancient name for Egypt, possibly referring to the black color of the fertile Nile soil. This connection between the word chem and the transformation of substances may have influenced the development of alchemy in the Arab world, which later spread to Europe during the Middle Ages. Thus, the etymology of the word alchemy reflects its history as a practice that crossed cultural boundaries, combining elements of philosophy, mysticism, and science. Carl Jung, in his study of alchemy, was aware of these influences and saw alchemy as a universal art of transformation, both in the physical and psychological sense. Philosophical influences in ancient alchemy. Ancient alchemy was deeply influenced by the philosophies of great civilizations such as Egypt and Greece, which viewed the physical and spiritual worlds as interconnected. In Egypt, alchemy was strongly connected to spirituality and the quest for immortality. The Egyptians believed that the alchemical process could be used to transform the soul, just as metals were transformed into something pure and eternal. Comparison between Eastern and Western alchemy. In comparing Eastern and Western alchemical traditions, Jung identified profound parallels, although they followed different spiritual approaches. Both forms of alchemy, whether in the East or West, sought transformation and spiritual elevation, but each followed distinct paths to achieve this goal. In Eastern alchemy, particularly in Chinese Taoism, the focus was more on the quest for longevity and spiritual immortality. The process of inner transformation involved meditative practices and balancing the body and mind's opposing energies, represented by yin and yang. For Jung, this reflected the process of integrating the conscious and unconscious, a concept he applied to his own theory of psychology. Western alchemy, on the other hand, was more focused on the transformation of physical substances, such as the transmutation of metals into gold, though its practitioners also sought a spiritual goal, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, a symbol of perfection and enlightenment. Although Jung recognized the value of both traditions, he chose to focus more on Western alchemy, as its symbols aligned more directly with the Western psychological tradition and his understanding of the unconscious. The origin of the term alchemy. The word alchemy has a rich and multifaceted origin, reflecting the blending of cultures and traditions that shaped the practice over the centuries. It is believed that the term comes from the Arabic alchemia, where al means the, and chemia refers to chemistry or a secret art. This Arabic term was influenced by the Greek word chemia, which refers to the art of transforming metals. In ancient Greece, this practice was already associated with attempts to transform ordinary materials into precious substances. Alchemy also has strong roots in ancient Egypt, where chem was the ancient name for Egypt, possibly referring to the black color of the fertile Nile soil. This connection between the word chem and the transformation of substances may have influenced the development of alchemy in the Arab world, which later spread to Europe during the Middle Ages. Thus, the etymology of the word alchemy reflects its history as a practice that crossed cultural boundaries, combining elements of philosophy, mysticism, and science. Carl Jung, in his study of alchemy, was aware of these influences and saw alchemy as a universal art of transformation, both in the physical and psychological sense. Philosophical influences in ancient alchemy. Ancient alchemy was deeply influenced by the philosophies of great civilizations such as Egypt and Greece, which viewed the physical and spiritual worlds as interconnected. In Egypt, alchemy was strongly connected to spirituality and the quest for immortality. The Egyptians believed that the alchemical process could be used to transform the soul, just as metals were transformed into something pure and eternal. In Greece, philosophers like Plato and Aristotle helped shape the alchemical view, believing that all matter was composed of the four elements: earth, water, fire, and air, and that, with the right balance, one substance could be transformed into another. These ideas were fundamental to alchemy, which also saw the material world as changeable and capable of transmutation. These philosophical influences helped alchemy become a practice that combined science, mysticism, and philosophy, aiming to achieve not only material transformation, but also spiritual elevation. Carl Jung recognized these influences and viewed alchemy as both a physical and psychological journey, a quest for the perfection of the soul. Immortality in alchemy and Egyptian mummification. The quest for immortality was a central goal in both alchemy and ancient Egyptian practices, such as mummification. In ancient Egypt, mummification symbolized the preservation of the body for the afterlife, reflecting the belief that the soul could live eternally if the body was properly conserved. Egyptians saw this practice as a path to achieving spiritual immortality. Similarly, alchemists, especially during the Middle Ages, sought the elixir of life, a mythical substance that was believed to grant eternal life to those who consumed it. This desire to prolong physical life reflected a deeper yearning for spiritual transformation and the conquest of eternity, not just for the body, but for the soul. Carl Jung recognized these connections and interpreted the alchemical search for immortality as a reflection of the human desire for transformation and spiritual elevation. For him, this pursuit was not limited to physical survival, but represented an inner journey toward wholeness and self-integration. Hermes Trismegistus, fusion of ancient knowledge. Hermes Trismegistus is a mythical figure symbolizing the fusion of Egyptian and Greek knowledge in alchemy. He is associated with both the Egyptian god Thoth, the god of wisdom, and the Greek god Hermes, the messenger of the gods and patron of magic and alchemy. Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great, was believed to be a sage who mastered science, philosophy, and mysticism, and many ancient alchemical texts, such as the famous Emerald Tablet, are attributed to him. The figure of Hermes Trismegistus became central to alchemy, representing the union between material and spiritual knowledge. He was seen as a master of transformation, both in the physical sense and in the psychological and spiritual sense. For Carl Jung, Hermes symbolized the role of the mediator between the conscious and the unconscious, reflecting the search for balance between opposites, a concept essential in his psychology. The wisdom attributed to Hermes Trismegistus deeply influenced alchemical thought, serving as the foundation for Jung's view of inner transformation and the integration of the different aspects of the psyche. The Emerald Tablet and universal balance. The Emerald Tablet is one of the most famous texts attributed to Hermes Trismegistus and holds a central place in alchemy. It contains the fundamental principle, as above, so below, suggesting a profound interconnection between the macrocosm, the universe, and the microcosm, the individual. This principle reflects the idea that what happens in the universe mirrors what happens within each person, and vice versa. Jung interpreted the Emerald Tablet as an expression of the connection between the macrocosm and the microcosm, the external and internal universe. Just as the alchemists sought to transform matter, Jung saw psychology as a journey of inner transformation, where the balance between the conscious and unconscious mirrored the universal balance. The Emerald Tablet also discusses the process of transmutation, which Jung interpreted as a symbol of individuation, the path toward psychic integration and wholeness. The gold that alchemists sought was, in fact, a metaphor for the spiritual and psychological perfection that each person could achieve. 3 historical phases of alchemy. The history of alchemy can be divided into 3 main phases, each with its own characteristics and contributions: the Hellenistic, the Arab, and the Latin phases. First phase, Hellenistic. Emerging after the conquest of Alexander the Great, this phase was marked by the fusion of Egyptian and Greek ideas. Alexandria, Egypt, became a major center of knowledge, where Greek philosophy merged with Egyptian spirituality, giving rise to an alchemical vision that combined the material and the spiritual. It was believed that the transformation of matter mirrored the transformation of the soul. Second phase, Arab. During the Middle Ages, Arab scholars preserved and expanded alchemical knowledge. They translated Greek and Egyptian texts and added their own scientific contributions. Arab alchemy was deeply influenced by practical chemistry, with figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan pioneering experiments and theories that led to the development of modern chemistry. The Arabs revitalized alchemy and spread this knowledge to Europe. Third phase, Latin. At the end of the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance, alchemy flourished in Europe. With the translation of Arab texts into Latin, European scholars began practicing alchemy as a form of science and mysticism. During this phase, alchemy was shaped by figures such as Paracelsus and deeply influenced Renaissance thought. At the same time, a distinction began to emerge between spiritual alchemy and practical chemistry. Carl Jung recognized the importance of these three phases in the evolution of alchemy, particularly in how it came to symbolize inner transformation, which he explored in his Psychology. The relevance of the Arabs in revitalizing alchemy. During the Middle Ages, Arab scholars played a crucial role in revitalizing and preserving alchemy. While Europe went through a period of scientific stagnation, the Arabs maintained and expanded ancient knowledge, translating important Greek and Egyptian texts on alchemy and adding their own contributions. Alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan, known as Geber in the West, not only preserved the teachings of ancient alchemy, but also made significant experimental discoveries that helped shape modern chemistry. They developed techniques such as distillation and sublimation, and they classified chemical substances in ways that are still used today. Arab influence was essential for the reintroduction of alchemical texts to Europe, where they later influenced Renaissance thinkers and helped shape Western knowledge. The influence of the Crusades on alchemy's return to Europe. The Crusades, occurring between the 11th and 13th centuries, not only changed Europe's political and religious dynamics, but also played a crucial role in reintroducing alchemical knowledge to the continent. During their expeditions to the Middle East, the Crusaders came into contact with Arab culture, which had preserved and expanded ancient knowledge, including alchemical and philosophical texts of Greek, Egyptian, and Persian origin. Through contact with the Arabs and the texts brought back from the Crusades, European scholars gained access to works that had been lost in the West, such as the writings of Jabir ibn Hayyan and translations of Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. These texts, which combined science and mysticism, reignited interest in alchemy in medieval Europe, especially among monks and scholars. This recovery of alchemical knowledge was essential for the Renaissance, when alchemy began to be studied more seriously as both a spiritual and scientific practice. For Carl Jung, this movement of recovering alchemical texts symbolized the return to the collective unconscious, where ancient traditions could be reinterpreted and integrated into the search for self-knowledge. Paracelsus and medicinal alchemy. Paracelsus, one of the most influential alchemists and physicians of the 16th century, revolutionized the practice of alchemy by introducing the concept of medicinal alchemy. He believed that the true purpose of alchemy was not just the transformation of metals, but the healing of both body and soul. Paracelsus proposed that, just as alchemists sought to transform base materials into pure substances, doctors should seek to restore health by balancing the elements and substances in the body. The relevance of the Arabs in revitalizing alchemy. During the Middle Ages, Arab scholars played a crucial role in revitalizing and preserving alchemy. While Europe went through a period of scientific stagnation, the Arabs maintained and expanded ancient knowledge, translating important Greek and Egyptian texts on alchemy and adding their own contributions. Alchemists like Jabir ibn Hayyan, known as Geber in the West, not only preserved the teachings of ancient alchemy, but also made significant experimental discoveries that helped shape modern chemistry. They developed techniques such as distillation and sublimation, and they classified chemical substances in ways that are still used today. Arab influence was essential for the reintroduction of alchemical texts to Europe, where they later influenced Renaissance thinkers and helped shape Western knowledge. The influence of the Crusades on alchemy's return to Europe. The Crusades, occurring between the 11th and 13th centuries, not only changed Europe's political and religious dynamics, but also played a crucial role in reintroducing alchemical knowledge to the continent. During their expeditions to the Middle East, the Crusaders came into contact with Arab culture, which had preserved and expanded ancient knowledge, including alchemical and philosophical texts of Greek, Egyptian, and Persian origin. Through contact with the Arabs and the texts brought back from the Crusades, European scholars gained access to works that had been lost in the West, such as the writings of Jabir ibn Hayyan and translations of Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. These texts, which combined science and mysticism, reignited interest in alchemy in medieval Europe, especially among monks and scholars. This recovery of alchemical knowledge was essential for the Renaissance, when alchemy began to be studied more seriously as both a spiritual and scientific practice. For Carl Jung, this movement of recovering alchemical texts symbolized the return to the collective unconscious, where ancient traditions could be reinterpreted and integrated into the search for self-knowledge. Paracelsus and medicinal alchemy. Paracelsus, one of the most influential alchemists and physicians of the 16th century, revolutionized the practice of alchemy by introducing the concept of medicinal alchemy. He believed that the true purpose of alchemy was not just the transformation of metals, but the healing of both body and soul. Paracelsus proposed that, just as alchemists sought to transform base materials into pure substances, doctors should seek to restore health by balancing the elements and substances in the body. He was a pioneer in the use of chemical substances and minerals in the treatment of diseases, breaking with the traditional medicine of the time, which was mainly based on herbs and superstitious practices. Paracelsus claimed that nature offered the remedies necessary to cure all diseases, provided they were properly manipulated. He introduced the use of compounds such as mercury, sulfur, and salt, laying the foundation for modern pharmacology. Carl Jung admired Paracelsus' holistic vision, which recognized the connection between physical health and spiritual transformation. For Jung, Paracelsus's approach reflected the concept of individuation, the process of psychological healing, and the integration of opposites, involving both body and mind. The decline of alchemy with the scientific method. In the 17th century, alchemy began to lose credibility with the rise of the scientific method, led by figures like Galileo Galilei and Isaac Newton. While alchemy combined science, mysticism, and philosophy, the scientific method relied on rigorous observation, controlled experiments, and repeatable evidence. This brought a radical shift in how knowledge was produced, favoring a more objective and verifiable approach. As modern chemistry developed, alchemy was increasingly seen as pseudoscience. Its attempts to turn common metals into gold and discover the elixir of life were dismissed as impossible fantasies. Science began to focus on natural laws and real chemical reactions, leaving behind the spiritual and symbolic aspect of alchemy. However, Carl Jung rescued the symbolic value of alchemy. For him, alchemy should not be viewed solely through the scientific lens, but as a rich metaphor for psychological processes of transformation and inner growth. Though alchemy lost its place as a science, Jung demonstrated that it still had much to offer in the fields of psychology and self-knowledge. Isaac Newton and hidden alchemy. Although Newton is best known for his contributions to physics and mathematics, such as the theory of gravitation and the laws of motion, he also devoted a significant part of his life to the study of alchemy. Newton was deeply interested in uncovering the secrets of matter and transmutation, and he wrote extensively on alchemy, though these writings were kept secret for much of his life. Newton considered alchemy essential for uncovering the hidden mysteries of matter and the cosmos. For him, the boundary between science and mysticism was much more fluid than in modern thought. However, his alchemical studies were kept secret, partly because alchemy had been discredited as pseudoscience by his contemporaries. After his death, many of his alchemical manuscripts were destroyed or ignored, and only in recent centuries have scholars begun to analyze these texts. When Carl Jung discovered that great scientists like Newton were dedicated to alchemy, he saw it as proof that alchemical symbolism had relevance even in the most rational circles. Jung believed that just as Newton sought to understand matter, alchemists were exploring the mysteries of the human psyche, and their studies revealed the depths of the unconscious. Alchemy as a metaphor for psychological transformation. As previously mentioned, Jung interpreted alchemy as a metaphor for psychological transformation. For him, the alchemical processes described in ancient texts, such as purification and the transmutation of metals, represented the stages the human psyche undergoes during the journey of self-discovery and inner healing. Alchemy, with its goal of turning lead into gold, was reinterpreted by Jung as the attempt to transform the darker, unconscious aspects of the personality into something valuable and enlightened. For Jung, alchemical work symbolized the human journey of inner transformation, where raw aspects of the psyche are refined into something more elevated. Just as the alchemist worked with raw substances, humans deal with unresolved aspects of their minds, seeking to transform them into emotional clarity and inner peace. These symbols represented, for Jung, stages of psychic transformation, as illustrated in concepts like nigredo, albedo, and rubedo. To him, alchemy provided a rich symbolic language to understand the process of inner healing and spiritual growth. The 7 alchemical metals and their astrological influences. In alchemy, the 7 primary metals, gold, silver, mercury, copper, iron, tin, and lead, were seen as much more than mere substances. They were closely linked to the planets in the solar system, believed to possess cosmic and spiritual influences. For example, gold was associated with the sun, symbolizing perfection, full consciousness, and enlightenment. Silver, connected to the moon, represented intuition, the unconscious, and the reflective side of the psyche. Mercury, tied to the planet Mercury, symbolized transformation and communication, capable of moving between opposites, a quality essential in both alchemy and Jung's psychology. Each of these metals also carried psychological and spiritual qualities that could be transmuted during the alchemical process. Iron, associated with Mars, evoked strength and conflict, while copper, linked to Venus, reflected beauty and harmony. For alchemists, working with these metals wasn't just a physical endeavor, it was also a way to manipulate spiritual and psychic energies. Jung connected the 7 alchemical metals to stages of spiritual and psychological development in humans. He suggested that these metals could also be linked to the chakras, the energy centers of the human body in Eastern traditions. Thus, the metals and their astrological correspondences represented not only chemical processes, but also stages of psychological and spiritual development. The transformation of these metals reflected, for Jung, the inner journey each person must undertake to integrate and balance their psychic energies and achieve wholeness. Prima materia and the process of spiritual transformation. In alchemy, prima materia represents the primordial substance from which everything originates. It is the starting point of the alchemical transformation, the raw material that must be purified and worked to reach its highest form. For alchemists, prima materia symbolized an initial state of chaos or disorder, a formless matter that needed to be transformed into something pure and precious, like gold. Carl Jung adopted this idea and applied it to psychology. He saw prima materia as a metaphor for the raw state of human consciousness. Jung believed that at the start of our psychological journey, we exist in a state of fragmentation and internal disorder, with aspects of our personality yet undeveloped or integrated. The alchemical process thus mirrored the psychological path of growth and transformation, which he called individuation. During this process, prima materia is cooked and transformed, just as our traumas, shadows, and unconscious aspects must be faced and worked through for us to achieve a greater state of balance and self-awareness. The work with prima materia, both for alchemists and Jung, symbolizes the journey of spiritual and psychological transformation, where the raw and unconscious are refined until they reach a more pure and conscious state. Solve et coagula, the heart of alchemy. The alchemical principle, solve et coagula, is central to both alchemy and Jungian psychology. Dissolve refers to the process of deconstructing old patterns, beliefs, or behaviors that no longer serve the individual. This often challenging moment of dissolution is necessary for us to confront the shadows and unconscious aspects of the psyche that block personal growth. It is a crucial phase in the individuation process, when the old structures of the ego are dismantled. The next phase, coagulate, involves restructuring and integrating the new insights gained after the dissolution. Just as the alchemist seeks to transform lead into gold, the individual rebuilds their identity in a more conscious and balanced way. This cycle of destruction and renewal is continuous, and Jung saw it as a reflection of the human journey of evolution, where each crisis or internal transformation offers the opportunity for psychic rebirth. The alchemical production of oils and liquors. In alchemy, distillation and fermentation were techniques used to produce essential oils and liquors. For alchemists, these practices symbolize the separation of impurities to extract the pure essence of substances. This process was seen as an analogy for the purification of the soul, where a person must distill and eliminate internal blockages and imperfections to reach a higher state of consciousness. Jung saw a correspondence between these alchemical processes and psychological work. Just as alchemists extracted the essence from substances, individuals must confront and purify their emotions and traumas to achieve a deeper psychic integration. For Jung, these alchemical methods mirrored the process of individuation, in which the human psyche transforms, becoming more conscious, clear, and balanced. Connection between body and spirit in alchemy. Alchemists believed that the material and spiritual worlds were intrinsically linked. The transformation of metals and physical substances represented for them a reflection of the spiritual and psychic transformations occurring internally. This concept of the interconnection between body and spirit reflects alchemy's holistic view, where the microcosm, the individual, is a reflection of the macrocosm, the universe. Jung adopted this symbolic view in his psychology, believing that internal psychic transformations also manifested in the body and spirit. The process of individuation, according to him, involved the balance between the physical, mental, and spiritual dimensions of the human being. Just as alchemists sought to fuse physical elements, Jung's psychological work sought to unite the conscious and unconscious, promoting psychic wholeness. The role of spirit as the link between body and soul. In alchemy, spirit, symbolized by Mercury, played the role of mediator between body and soul. Mercury, with its fluid and mutable nature, could transition between different states of matter, and this quality was seen as a reflection of the human spirit, which connects the physical and spiritual realms. For alchemists, the spirit was essential for both transmutation and the elevation of both matter and soul. Jung used this image to explain the psychic processes involved in individuation. He saw the spirit as the mediating force that connects the desires and impulses of the body with the aspirations and needs of the soul. This balance is crucial for the individual to integrate the different parts of the psyche and achieve a state of internal harmony. Just like Mercury in alchemy, the spirit has the ability to move between different levels of consciousness, guiding the human being on the path of self-transformation. The Ouroboros, symbol of the infinite cycle. The Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, is one of alchemy's most powerful symbols, representing the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. For alchemists, it symbolized the cyclical nature of life, where destruction and creation occur continuously. The Ouroboros also suggested self-sufficiency and wholeness, as the serpent feeds on itself, regenerating infinitely. This process of self-containment reflects the quest for completeness and internal balance. For Jung, the Ouroboros symbolized the cyclical movement of the psyche, where crises and transformations lead to self-knowledge and internal renewal. Just as the serpent consumes itself to be reborn, the individual goes through phases of destroying old identities and integrating new aspects of the psyche. The 7 alchemical operations and psychological transformation. For Carl Jung, the 7 alchemical operations are metaphors for the psychological and spiritual processes we undergo throughout life. Each of these operations reflects an important stage of inner transformation and is related to one of the elements, earth, water, fire, and air, symbolizing phases of purification, dissolution, and reconstruction. 1. Calcinatio, burning, associated with fire. The first stage, where something is burned to remove its impurities. Psychologically, this represents confronting and destroying parts of the ego that are rigid or limiting. Jung saw this as the beginning of the purification process, where we start to shed negative behaviors and beliefs. Fire, in this context, acts as a purifying element, transforming the ego through the burning of its rigid aspects. 2. Solutio, dissolution, associated with water. The substance is dissolved in water, symbolizing the loosening of the ego's rigid structures. Psychologically, this is the phase of diving into the unconscious, where old ways of thinking are dissolved, allowing access to new ideas and insights. Water, with its fluidity, symbolizes movement in the unconscious, dissolving what was once solid and making way for new perceptions. Coagulatio, solidification, associated with earth. What was dissolved is now reunited and solidified again. This represents the process of integrating new understandings into our psyche, creating a stronger, more balanced identity. Earth here symbolizes stability and structure, as it is where new ideas materialize and take shape in the conscious world. 4. Sublimation, associated with air. Here, matter is transformed directly into vapor, without passing through the liquid state. It symbolizes the elevation of the spirit above earthly problems, where one can view their life and challenges from a higher perspective. Air, a symbol of elevation and higher thought, represents transcendence and the ability to see beyond worldly difficulties. 5. Mortificatio, death associated with earth. This is the stage of decomposition and symbolic death. Jung related this to the death of the ego, where parts of ourselves that no longer serve our development need to be abandoned to allow for an inner rebirth. Earth, once again, symbolizes renewal and cycle, representing death that prepares the ground for the new. 6. Separation, associated with air and water. At this stage, the elements are separated to distinguish what is pure from what is impure. Psychologically, this means distinguishing and recognizing the different aspects of our psyche, allowing parts of the unconscious to be brought to light. Air provides the clarity and discernment necessary for this separation, while water helps purify and bring these elements to the surface. 7. Conjunctio, union, symbolizing the combination of all elements. Finally, the opposites are reunited, symbolizing the union of conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter. For Jung, this is the stage of wholeness, where we achieve individuation, integrating all parts of our psyche. In this stage, all elements come together, forming a balance between fire, water, earth, and air, reflecting internal harmony. These 7 operations serve as metaphors for the processes of psychic transformation, leading to psychic wholeness. In addition to the 7 operations, alchemy also has 3 main phases that describe the complete transformation of a substance. Jung interpreted these phases as broad stages of psychological transformation, linking them to natural elements and processes of transmutation. Nigredo, darkness associated with earth. This is the initial phase, marked by symbolic death and chaos. For Jung, it represents the confrontation with the shadow, the most hidden and repressed aspects of the psyche. It is a painful moment but necessary for growth, and earth symbolizes the preparation for rebirth. Albedo, whitening, associated with water. After the chaos of Nigredo, purification follows. This phase symbolizes the clarity and light that emerge when the unconscious begins to integrate with the conscious. The individual starts to see their internal conflicts more clearly, and water, with its purifying power, represents this psychic renewal. Rubedo, reddening, associated with fire. The final phase, where enlightenment and wholeness occur. It symbolizes the complete integration of the conscious and unconscious, bringing harmony and fulfillment. For Jung, this phase reflects the state of individuation, when a person reaches psychological completeness. Fire, here, is a symbol of the final transformation and the complete realization of the self. For Carl Jung, the 7 operations and phases of alchemy symbolize the psychological process of seeking self-knowledge and wholeness. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. This helps us continue to bring quality content for you.